It looks like we are getting closer to finally knowing what the college football playoff is going to look like 2026 and beyond. Could it be the death of the ACC and the conference my team plays in, the Big 12? We're going to talk about that, and I'm going to give you my thoughts right after this word from my sponsor. Ladies and gentlemen, this episode is brought to you by Dutch Miller Automotive, where friends and family pricing means you get the best deal right up front on any new or pre-loved vehicle in stock every time. With brands like Chevrolet, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, Kia, Hyundai, Ford, GMC, Buick, and Subaru, the Dutch Miller Automotive family is always growing and ready to put you in the car or truck you've been searching for. Check out our inventory across West Virginia at DutchMillerAuto.com or come in today to the home of friends and family pricing, only at a Dutch Miller Automotive store near you. What is up? Come on in, make yourself comfortable, belly yourself up to the bar, and let me pour you out this shot of top shelf college football content. On tap at Couz's Corner today, we're talking about the college football playoff, specifically the revenue model that apparently has been agreed upon by the two conferences that many thought might push back, and that's the Big 12 and the ACC. Most of you probably have heard the story by now, have heard the reports by now, that the Big 10 and the SEC are wanting a greater share of the revenue for the new CFP model, 2026 to 2031. Well, according to an article put out yesterday by Ross Dellinger, it looks like they're going to get their wish and that the Big 12 and ACC are actually on board with this. Now, I'm going to go through this article by Ross, and I'm going to kind of speak to it as we go. So I'm not just going to read the whole thing to you and bore you to death for the next 3 to 4 minutes. I will speak to the article as we go. Before we get into it, though, I want to give a quick shout out to my VIP members of the day. They are Jeremy Croy, Vernon Sheldon Witter, Brad Cheney, and Kenny Evans. I thank you all for being VIP members here at Couz's Corner. If you want to become a member of the VIP club, all you have to do is hit the join button below or go into my description box, find the link to my channel page, and join that way. There are perks that go along with being a member. All those are outlined once you hit the button. Now, let's get into the show. Again, this is by Ross Dellinger from Yahoo Sports. There will be a link to this article if you want to go read it afterwards. Now, it says the college football playoff is inching closer to finalizing its agreement for the future. Presidents in the ACC and Big 12 voted to authorize their commissioners to adopt the future framework related to a new CFP, including a new revenue model and concepts around the playoff format, all of which will be part of a new contract with ESPN. Now, most of you probably have heard by now, ESPN has agreed basically, at least in terms. It's not been signed yet because they're waiting on, the commissioners to make a decision and the board of managers, which is the presidents, to make a decision on how it's going to look. They want to know what they're paying for. But right now they've agreed to a $1.3 billion college football playoff model from 2026 through 2031. But ESPN doesn't want to sign it until they know exactly what they're paying for. Let's keep going. Those with knowledge of the discussion spoke to Yahoo Sports under condition of anonymity. The two leagues were thought to be the most resistant to a deal. Their presidential vote is viewed as a significant hurdle cross to reaching an agreement. The Big 12 and ACC votes were unanimous, sources told Yahoo Sports. The CFP Management Committee, the 10 FBS commissioners, and Notre Dame's athletic director, is expected to meet over the next few days in a gathering that should produce some finality on what's been a long, dramatic march to the playoffs' future beginning in 2026. Now, we all know again, the current model runs through 2025. And in 2024, 2025, we're going to have a 5+7 model, 5 automatic bids to the top 5 conference champions plus 7 at-larges. And they're going to be doing that under the current agreement with ESPN that they're playing under right now, and they're dividing the money up equally, which we'll get to in just a minute. Each conference in Notre Dame will be asked to either commit or not to the new CFP framework. The expectation, pending the approval from each conference presidential board, is that all 10 conferences will commit to, most notably, a new revenue distribution model, parameters around a playoff format, and a new governance structure. Notre Dame is supportive of the framework, multiple sources told Yahoo Sports. As detailed in a Yahoo Sports story last Friday, a proposal for a new revenue distribution model is heavily weighted toward the Big 10 and SEC, according to those briefed in the matter. Now, this heavily weighted model is why many on social media are saying this is terrible for the Big 12 and ACC. They should have never agreed to this, and it's terrible. Now, there are others saying, hey, this is not a bad deal for the Big 12. I'm going to give you my thoughts once we get through the article. It says, any proposal socialized with administrators over the last 10 days, the Big Ten and SEC would combine to earn about 58% of the CFP's base distribution. The figure would greatly exceed the ACC and Big 12's combined distribution number, which is expected to be around 32%. The remaining amount, roughly 10%, will be distributed to Notre Dame and the 64 Group of 5 teams. The difference in distribution between the two sets of conferences, SEC Big 10 and ACC Big 12, could exceed $300 million. Now remember, this is on top of the fact that they're already $30 to $40 million per team ahead of the ACC and Big 12 in their base TV revenue. So the gap's already 30 to 40 million a team, could grow to 50 million over time in some cases. This will increase that gap even more. Based on the math I did, this is going to make that gap grow to somewhere between another $15 to $20 million per team. So a lot of people are wondering, why in the world would the ACC and Big 12 agree to that? Well, I'll be honest with you. I'm not sure they had a choice. Plus, there are things coming down the pipeline, which I'll get, the article speaks to later. These schools have got to bring in as much revenue as possible. And this new model will still increase revenue by a large margin for these schools. Even though it may not be to the same level as the Big Ten and SEC, it will still be a significant increase in revenue over what they're getting today. For example, Big 12 schools right now are getting about $6 million for the college football playoff. Whether they get a team in or not, they get about $6 million. The way this is going to be set up, they should get somewhere around 12 to 13 million per team every year. So their revenue is going to double. The thing is, the Big Ten and SEC's revenue is probably going to triple or even quadruple in some cases. Now, let's keep going with the article. The Power Two stand to earn a combined figure that should eclipse $700 million, far more than the ACC and Big 12's number of around $400 million. Roughly $115 million is slotted for the Group of 5. No school's revenue will decrease, as I mentioned, as the CFP is expected to earn 3 times the amount it did in the 4-team version. Major conference schools currently receive about $6 million in distribution from the CFP. The SEC and Big 10 schools will see their annual distribution triple, if not quadruple, into the low $20 million range. The Big 12 and ACC are set to see a doubling of their previous amounts. Notre Dame is expected to receive its own annual distribution that is expected to increase significantly from its current distribution. According to the latest proposal, there is not expected to be a participation distribution concept as part of the new revenue model, a change that leaders made to the original proposal circulated last week. The current model calls for participating teams to earn revenue by qualifying and then advancing through the field. The CFP-based revenue distribution model is largely based on historic success in the playoff over the previous decade. Considering future realignment moves, the SEC and Big Ten account for 72.5% of CFP participants. The SEC leads all conferences with 17 appearances in the 14 field when factoring in Oklahoma and Texas. The Big Ten is next at 12 when factoring in its 4 new schools. The ACC, 7 teams, and Big 12, 2 follow. The contract is expected to include a definitive look-in provision in 2028 where revenue distribution and format can be reevaluated. Now, this part right here is, to me, key as to why I don't think this will kill the Big 12. And Brett Yormark pushed for this. This look-in provision may be the reason these 2 conferences agreed to this, or at least the Big 12 anyway, is this look-in provision. In 2028, they will go in and take another look at this model to see if it still makes sense. So, for example, let's just say theoretically, the ACC and or Big 12 get more teams into the CFP than they originally anticipated over the first 2 years of the agreement, 2026 and 2027. Then in 2028, they can look at this thing and go, well, wait a minute now. This thing was weighted on the amount of teams each conference had been getting into the playoff. Well, the ACC and Big 12 are getting more teams in than they have in the past. So we need to get a bigger piece of the revenue pie, and it will give them a chance to go back to the negotiating table. And here's another key point. that Ross makes in the article. And it says, the look-in provision can be triggered earlier by any conference realignment. Now, I did a video talking about this the other day. I'll link to that at the end. But I'm going to read that again. The look-in provision can be triggered earlier by any conference realignment. So let's just say the PAC, or the ACC rather, does happen to go the way of the PAC and implode. And let's just say the Big 12 adds some of those teams. Or even the Big 10 and the SEC add some teams from that implosion. And let's say that happens in 2026. Well, they will be able to go and look in and redo this thing in 2026. They don't have to wait till 2028. And if the ACC, let's just say the ACC implodes and it's not even a league at that point, and you're left with 3 power conferences, the SEC, the Big 10, the Big 12, maybe the Big 12 gets a bigger piece of that pie. Now, I don't think that's good for college football. It's not really what I want to see happen. However, it's very possible that it could. So we've got to be realistic here. And because of this provision, I don't think this is a death knell to the Big 12 conference, unlike some of my Big 12 counterparts out there. Let's keep going with the article. It says a playoff format is further from being settled, but the contract is expected to include several guaranteed protections related to a format. The champions of the 4 major conferences and the highest-ranked group of 5 champion will earn an automatic qualifying spot into any playoff. Notre Dame is expected to have its own protections related to a format. Now, the reason I think that's important, that each champion of the power conferences and best group of 5 get an automatic berth, is that protects conference title games, in my opinion. And all these leagues bring in good money, big money from the conference title games because they get really good viewership. They do not need to do anything that destroys conference championships, in my opinion. Let's keep going. Other details of the formula are expected to be finalized after the leagues reach an agreement with ESPN on the television deal, which will run through the 2031 playoff, according to the network's own reporting. For 24 and 25, the format is set as a 5+7, 12-team model, which grants automatic qualifying spots to the 5 highest-ranked champions and 7 at-large spots to the next highest-ranked teams. Just like their heavy revenue share, the SEC and Big Ten are expected to hold significant weight in determining a future format. A variety of 14-team formats continue to circulate across the industry. One in particular, a 5+9 14 model, is gaining traction. So basically, you take the 5+7 model that they've agreed on for 24 and 25, you just add 2 more at-large spots to it. You protect the automatic qualifiers for each conference title game, for each conference champion. You guarantee a spot for the group of 5, and you have 9 at-large spots where each conference has an opportunity to get more teams in, and it also has an extra spot for Notre Dame to earn an opportunity. It says that format mirrors the current 5+7 12-team format, but features an additional 2 at-large spots. Presumably, that model would grant automatic berths to the 5 highest-ranked conference champions. There still exists possibility of multiple automatic qualifiers for individual leagues, including a format that grants 3 automatic qualifiers each to the SEC and Big 10, 2 each to the ACC and Big 12, and 1 to the highest-ranked group of 5 program with 3 at-large spots. It's a 3-3-2-2-1+3 model. We've heard about this for a couple weeks now. This is the one the SEC and Big Ten are pushing for because they feel like they've earned an extra automatic berth. I disagree with that. If you're already getting 58% of the revenue, you don't need to be guaranteed more automatic qualifying spots. That could be a potential death knell if they get all of this. I was actually okay with that model when it first came out, but the more I think about it, if you're already going to give those 2 leagues a higher amount of the base revenue, they also don't need to get an automatic greater number of teams because that puts them in an even bigger advantage, even widens the gap even more. And even though the number of teams you get in may not impact the revenue, it impacts the exposure for the universities and for the conferences. And that is not a good thing. And plus, the way it has been the last several years, having 9 at-large bids gives the SEC and Big Ten an advantage anyway, in my opinion, at least in the near future, and especially since the revenue gap's going to be so big. Don't give them an even bigger advantage. Let's keep going. There is a 2-2-1-1-1+7 model under consideration, too. It grants 2 automatic berths each to the SEC and Big Ten, 1 each to the ACC and Big 12, 1 to the highest-ranked group of 5 with 7 at-large spots. I hate that model. I think it's terrible. The concept of the Big Ten and SEC holding exclusive rights over the first 2 round buys has received enough pushback that it has been tabled, as Yahoo Sports reported Friday, and that is a good thing. The money is a more important matter than any format. Revenue is more, and this is what I mentioned earlier. This right here, what I'm going to read right now from this article is why the Big 12 and ACC probably agreed to this model more than anything. They need as much revenue as possible because we could be seeing a world where schools pay NIL. We could be going to a world where schools have to do revenue sharing with student athletes. We could be moving to a world where schools have to pay tens of millions of dollars in back pay because of a court case that's going on right now. NIL back pay. It's called the House case. It's supposed to be ruled on in early January or February of 2025 if they don't come to a settlement sooner. It says, revenue is more significant than ever. The major conferences and their members are gearing up for a future athlete compensation model. The concept, whether employment, revenue sharing, or collective bargaining, necessitates extra cash flow to be put aside for players. The leagues are also in jeopardy of owing billions of dollars in retroactive NIL pay and television distribution as a result of several ongoing antitrust lawsuits. Again, that's why I think it's imperative that the Big 12 and ACC get as much money as possible. And for those of you saying this gives the Big SEC and Big 10 too much of an advantage, yes, it does. But you know what? There was absolutely nothing, in my opinion, that the Big 12 and ACC can do about that. That road has already been traveled. The toothpaste is already out of the tube. The genie's out of the bottle. Whatever metaphor you want to use, we're already there. We're already there. And by the ACC and Big 12 turning down this deal, they could be pissing off the SEC and Big 10 even more and basically getting us further down the road towards a potential separation of those two leagues. Now, I have said in previous videos that I think that's okay. But the more I think about it and the more I think about this revenue thing, could the ACC and Big 12 make that kind of revenue if they had their own playoff? I'm not sure they could. And apparently they know that, or they wouldn't agree to this deal. But I heard another podcaster say yesterday that, look at Clemson. Clemson has been in a financial disadvantage for a while now, and they're still getting teams into the national championship and winning them. Now, the gap was not as big then as it's going to be, so I understand that that's not necessarily apples to apples, but it's a fair point. And on 365 the other day, I heard an interview where they talked about how it's cyclical. The conferences that are dominating can be cyclical. Now, the thing is, if you give the SEC and Big 10 this huge financial advantage, I'm not sure it'll be cyclical anymore. They're basically going to dominate. But let's face it, the $30 to $40 million gap that's already been created by the TV deal had already done that. I hate to tell you, Big 12 fans, we can sit here and wish all day long for us to pick off all these ACC teams. That's not going to help us that much. You know why? Because if we're getting big ACC teams, that means the Big 10 and SEC are too. They're just getting even more power. We're not going to catch the SEC and Big 10. The best you can hope for, if you're a fan of a Big 12 or ACC team, you better hope and pray that your team somehow, some way gets invited to one of these leagues. That's the only way they're going to keep up financially. Otherwise, you've just got to hope that you get a great coach, you get great recruiting, and your team is somehow able to compete despite the disadvantages. Those are our two options. It's where we are. It's the world we live in. We either have to get on board with it. We can bitch and moan about it, which we're going to do, especially people like me who get on here and are a talking head. We can bitch and moan about it all day long, but it's the world we live in. We may as well get used to it and let these schools get as much revenue as they can. Even if the other conferences are getting more, at least let them maximize the revenue they can get. And going from $6 million to $12 million and doubling your revenue each year is a no-brainer. You can't say no to that if there's not a better option. It's biting your nose off to spite your face. Another metaphor. I like metaphors. I'm sorry. If you don't, I apologize. I like metaphors, and I think biting your nose off to spite your face is something the Big 12 and ACC could not afford to do here. They have to maximize the revenue, and it sounds like this was the best way to do that. And if they wait too long to come to an agreement, ESPN could walk away from the deal and nobody gets anything. How is that helping? That doesn't help the situation. So either take $6 million, nothing, or $12 million. What are you taking if it's your decision? I mean, think about it. Think about it. I want to hear your thoughts. Do you disagree with me? And if you do, that's totally fair. I respect your opinion. I want to hear it in the comment section. Also, support your team's NIL efforts by getting yourself some ONIT athlete trading cards. Go to the description box, click the link, get yourself some ONIT athlete trading cards of your favorite team, and it'll support me because I'll make a small commission, and your favorite student athlete will make 60% of the profits from purchasing those ONIT NIL trading cards. Remember the video I mentioned earlier that I did a few days ago where I talked about the Big 12 potentially adding ACC teams in the future? You can check it out right here. In the meantime, have a top shelf day and cue Country Roads.